Breaking: Ukraine strikes deep inside Russia and beyond. S-400 launchers destroyed in Belgorod, armored assaults crushed, and for the first time ever, Russian tankers hit 2,000 kilometers away in the Mediterranean. Drone attacks, naval hits, and massive battlefield victories. Ukraine is showing the world no target is safe. Stay tuned for the latest explosive updates from the front lines. We are going to post from Military News UA, handle @front_Ukrainian. Ukrainian Defense Forces carried out a successful special operation near Pokrovsk, destroying a concentration of Russian armored vehicles that were being prepared for an assault. The operation was conducted by the 7th Rapid Reaction Corps of the Airborne Assault Troops of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Destroyed were one OSA air defense system, also known as SA-8, 2 tanks, 1 infantry fighting vehicle, and 1 military vehicle carrying ammunition. Additionally, damaged were 5 tanks, 6 infantry fighting vehicles, 2 military vehicles, and 4 light vehicles. This post describes a significant Ukrainian preemptive strike near Pokrovsk, targeting Russian armored units before they could launch an assault. By hitting a concentrated group of vehicles, Ukrainian forces disrupted what appears to have been an organized offensive operation. The destruction of an OSA, or SA-8 air defense system is particularly notable, as it reduces Russian short-range air protection in the area, making their ground forces more vulnerable to drones and air-guided strikes. Damaging multiple tanks and infantry fighting vehicles further weakens Russia's ability to maneuver and sustain offensive pressure on this sector of the front. Overall, this highlights Ukraine's growing focus on intelligence-driven strikes aimed at stopping Russian attacks before they begin, shifting the battlefield dynamic from reactive defense to proactive disruption. We are going to our next post from Nexta, handle @nexta.tv. They report, breaking news, a Russian drone has crashed in Turkey about 50 kilometers from Istanbul. The drone is identified as a Russian Orlan-10 unmanned aerial vehicle. It reportedly crashed in a rural area near Izmit in Kocaeli province. Turkey is a NATO member state, and authorities have launched an investigation into the incident. This incident is significant because it involves a Russian military drone crashing inside the territory of a NATO member country. Even if accidental, such events raise serious security and diplomatic concerns. The Orlan-10 is a Russian reconnaissance drone commonly used for surveillance and targeting. Its presence near Turkey suggests either navigational failure, electronic interference, or unintended overflight, all of which carry sensitive implications given Turkey's role in NATO and its complex relationship with both Russia and Ukraine. While there's no indication of hostile intent at this stage, incidents like this increase tension and risk miscalculation. NATO countries closely monitor any unauthorized military activity near or within their airspace. Overall, this highlights how the war is increasingly shifting into a global shadow war phase, involving intelligence services, covert assets, and strikes far from the traditional front lines. We're going to our next post from Jürgen Naudit, handle @Jürgen_Naudit. This report claims that Ukrainian forces have likely attacked tankers belonging to Russia's so-called shadow fleet in the Mediterranean Sea. According to Russian media, the ships were allegedly carrying Andrei Averyanov, the head of Russia's military intelligence service, the GRU, and considered one of Vladimir Putin's closest confidants. His deputies were reportedly on board. The report states that 7 people were injured and 2 were killed. Preliminary information suggests the attack may have been carried out using drones launched from maritime bases. Andrei Averyanov is a Russian intelligence general accused of espionage, sabotage, explosions, and drone operations in multiple countries. He has also been linked by investigators to the poisoning of Sergei Skripal in the United Kingdom and the crash of Yevgeny Prigozhin's plane in Russia. At this time, official confirmation is still pending. If confirmed, this would represent a dramatic escalation in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, expanding operations far beyond Eastern Europe into the Mediterranean. Targeting vessels linked to Russia's shadow fleet would strike directly at Moscow's covert logistics and financial networks used to bypass sanctions. The alleged presence of Andrei Averyanov, one of Russia's most senior intelligence figures, would make this operation exceptionally significant. Averyanov has long been associated with high-profile covert actions abroad, making him a central figure in Russia's intelligence and sabotage operations. Drone attacks launched from maritime bases would also signal a major leap in Ukraine's operational reach and naval drone capabilities. However, without official confirmation, these claims remain unverified. Overall, this report highlights how the war is increasingly shifting into a global shadow war phase, involving intelligence services, covert assets, and strikes far from the traditional front lines. We're going to our next post from Antono Gerashenko, handle @gerashenko.en. He quotes Vladimir Putin saying, "We do not consider ourselves responsible for the deaths of people because we didn't start this war." Gerashenko responds by calling this a cynical lie, stating that Putin has waged the largest war in Europe in 80 years, resulting in massive loss of life. This post highlights a sharp contrast between Russia's official narrative and the view held by Ukraine and many in the international community. Putin's statement reflects Moscow's long-standing position that it is not responsible for civilian deaths, framing the war as forced or defensive. However, Ukraine and Western governments reject this claim, pointing to Russia's full-scale invasion as the initiating act that triggered the conflict and its humanitarian consequences. Labeling Putin a war criminal reflects accusations tied to civilian casualties, infrastructure destruction, and alleged violations of international law, issues that remain central to investigations by international courts and human rights organizations. Overall, this exchange underscores how the war is fought not only with weapons, but with narratives. Competing claims over responsibility and blame continue to shape global opinion, diplomatic pressure, and the long-term legal consequences of the conflict.
We are going to our next post from World War Again, handle @WorldWarAgain. They claim Ukraine received 1,003 deceased Ukrainian soldiers in exchange for 26 Russian ones. That would equal roughly 38 Ukrainian deaths for every Russian death. This post presents casualty exchange figures that have not been independently verified and should be treated with caution. In wartime, numbers related to deaths and prisoner or body exchanges are frequently politicized and used to shape public perception. Both Ukraine and Russia tightly control information about casualties, often releasing selective or incomplete data. Claims of extreme casualty ratios are commonly part of information warfare, aimed at portraying one side as either overwhelmingly dominant or suffering catastrophic losses. Without confirmation from neutral or international sources, such figures remain unverified. What is clear, however, is that the human cost of the war continues to rise on both sides, regardless of the exact numbers. Overall, this post highlights how casualty statistics are used not only to report events, but to influence morale, narratives, and international opinion in an ongoing information war alongside the fighting. We are going to our next post from Defense Index, handle @defense_index. They report Ukraine's security service, the SBU, struck the Oman-flagged tanker Kendil while it was en route from India to Russia's Ust-Luga port. The attack reportedly took place in neutral Mediterranean waters, southeast of Greece, more than 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. The tanker was empty and critically damaged, with no risk of an oil spill. This is described as the first Ukrainian attack on a Russian shadow fleet vessel in the Mediterranean. This report, if confirmed, would mark a major escalation in the geographic scope of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Striking a shadow fleet tanker in the Mediterranean extends Ukrainian operations far beyond the Black Sea and Eastern Europe. Russia's so-called shadow fleet is used to transport oil and goods while bypassing Western sanctions. Targeting these vessels directly challenges Russia's ability to sustain its war economy and undermines one of Moscow's key financial lifelines.
The fact that the tanker was empty and posed no spill risk suggests the operation was designed to send a strategic message rather than cause environmental damage. Conducting such an operation over 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine would also demonstrate a significant expansion of Ukraine's intelligence reach and maritime strike capability. Overall, this highlights a shift toward globalized covert pressure on Russian assets, moving the conflict into a broader economic and strategic battlefield. We are going to our next post from G-Man, handle @GMFAB87. The post quotes a question and a response involving Donald Trump. The question was, "Mr. President, there's a meeting this weekend on Ukraine in Florida. What are you hoping will come out of that meeting?" Trump responded, "Well, they're getting close to something, but I hope Ukraine moves quickly. I hope Ukraine moves quickly because Russia is there, and every time they take too much time, then Russia changes their mind." The post author adds a comment saying that based on recent statements from Putin, it does not appear that Russia is actually ready for compromise. This post highlights Donald Trump's continued emphasis on speed in potential Ukraine peace negotiations. His remarks suggest delays benefit Russia, allowing Moscow to strengthen its position and potentially raise its demands. However, the author's comment introduces an important counterpoint. Recent statements from Vladimir Putin have shown little indication of meaningful compromise, raising doubts about whether Russia is truly ready for a deal, regardless of Ukraine's timing. This contrast exposes a key tension in the diplomatic debate, whether accelerating talks can realistically lead to peace, or whether it risks pressuring Ukraine into concessions while Russia maintains maximalist demands. Overall, this exchange reflects the growing uncertainty surrounding negotiations, where urgency, leverage, and political messaging collide, and where timing alone may not be enough to produce a viable settlement. We are going to our next post from Kate from Kharkiv, handle @Bohuslavska-Kate. She reports, "For the first time, Ukrainian drones have struck a Russian tanker in the Mediterranean Sea, roughly 2,000 kilometers from Ukrainian territory. The targeted vessel, named Kandil, had earlier delivered oil to India's Sika port and was returning to Russia's Ust-Luga port." She adds that this was likely the tanker's last run. This post reinforces reports that Ukraine has expanded its operations far beyond its immediate region, striking a Russian-linked oil tanker in the Mediterranean Sea. If confirmed, this would mark a historic first for Ukrainian long-range maritime drone or covert strike capabilities. The tanker's connection to oil deliveries highlights the economic dimension of the war. Targeting vessels linked to Russia's shadow fleet directly threatens Moscow's ability to generate revenue and bypass international sanctions. Conducting such an operation over 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine would demonstrate a significant leap in intelligence reach, operational planning, and strategic messaging. It suggests Ukraine is increasingly willing to pressure Russian interests globally, not just on the front lines.
We are going to our next post from Defense of Ukraine, handle @DefenseU. They report, "Another Russian attack has failed. Russian forces attempted to break through the positions of Ukraine's 92nd Assault Brigade. According to the post, Ukrainian UAV crews responded with drone strikes, destroying 2 trucks, 1 T-72 tank, 1 MTLB armored vehicle, 1 infantry fighting vehicle, and 35 Russian soldiers." This post describes a failed Russian assault that was stopped through the use of Ukrainian drone operations. The involvement of UAV crews highlights how drones have become a decisive tool on the modern battlefield, allowing Ukrainian forces to detect, target, and neutralize attacking units before they can achieve a breakthrough. The destruction of armored vehicles, including a T-72 tank and an infantry fighting vehicle, suggests the attack was a coordinated mechanized push rather than a small probing action. Losing both equipment and personnel in a single failed assault further strains Russia's offensive capabilities in this sector. Overall, this reinforces a recurring pattern in the war. Russian ground assaults are increasingly vulnerable to Ukrainian drone surveillance and precision strikes, shifting the balance toward defense through technology rather than massed armor. We are going to our next post from Tendar, handle @Tendar. They report, "For the very first time, a Ukrainian drone attacked a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker in the Mediterranean Sea. What makes this especially notable is that no unmanned surface vessel was used. Instead, a grenade-dropping aerial drone carried out the strike.
The message, according to the Post, is clear. No Russian tanker is safe, no matter where it operates. This post adds an important technical and strategic detail to earlier reports about Ukrainian strikes on Russia's shadow fleet. The use of a grenade-dropping aerial drone rather than a naval drone suggests operational flexibility and a lower-cost, harder-to-detect attack method. If confirmed, this signals a new phase in Ukraine's maritime and economic warfare strategy. By demonstrating that even distant tankers can be targeted with relatively simple platforms, Ukraine sends a strong deterrent message to Russia's logistics and energy networks. The broader implication is psychological as much as material. Even limited damage forces Russia to increase security costs, reroute shipping, and reassess the safety of its shadow fleet operations worldwide. Overall, this reinforces the idea that the conflict is expanding beyond land battles into a global campaign targeting Russia's financial and logistical lifelines. So, overall overview is, the Ukraine-Russia conflict is escalating on multiple fronts, with Ukraine demonstrating unprecedented operational reach and tactical precision. Ukrainian forces have carried out bold strikes deep inside Russia, destroying S-400 air defense launchers in Belgorod and targeting Russian armored formations near Pokrovsk. These operations are not just defensive, they showcase Ukraine's ability to preemptively disrupt Russian offensives before they can achieve a breakthrough. At the same time, Ukraine is extending the battlefield far beyond its borders. For the first time, Ukrainian drones have struck Russian-linked tankers in the Mediterranean Sea, some 2,000 kilometers from Ukrainian territory. These attacks targeted vessels involved in Russia's shadow fleet, using advanced aerial drone tactics, including grenade-dropping UAVs. The message is clear. No Russian military or economic asset is safe, whether on land or at sea. Meanwhile, global politics are heating up. Europe has approved a $105 billion funding plan to support Ukraine, part of a broader strategy to stabilize Kyiv's defense and economic position. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has publicly urged Ukraine to act quickly in negotiations, warning that delays could strengthen Russia's leverage. Ukrainian President Zelensky has also demanded Russia's frozen assets as a reparation loan, pressing both moral and strategic claims. Propaganda and narrative warfare remain central to the conflict. Russian officials continue to deny responsibility for civilian casualties, while casualty figures, prisoner exchanges, and battlefield losses are used on both sides to influence public perception and morale. In parallel, incidents like Russian drones crashing in Turkey, a NATO member state, highlight the global spillover effects of this war. From preemptive armored strikes and drone precision attacks to financial maneuvers and international diplomatic pressure, the Ukraine-Russia conflict is no longer just about territory. It has evolved into a multi-dimensional war involving intelligence operations, economic warfare, and global strategy. To stay on top of every battlefield development, covert operation, and geopolitical update, subscribe to Deep War Files. We break down the war, analyze the strategy, and show you the frontline realities that the world needs to see. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the front lines of information today.